In this episode,
Well, creativity is the reason I get up in the morning, right? If I'm not, if I, I mean, otherwise it's like, what am I doing today? If I'm not going in to create, if I'm not going in to solve problems by creating solutions, then I think life gets a bit boring. I don't know why anyone goes to work if they're not, if they're not going out to create and change and improve. Otherwise, what's the point? I'd rather be a park ranger, to be honest, and do something that's vocational.
Yeah.
But the idea of going to an office or going into a business and not thinking about what could I do better, that would scare me, actually. That would frighten me it would feel very suffocating to not be thinking like that.
Welcome to Gut Instinct. I'm Evan. Gut Instinct is a podcast series where I interview leading scientists, entrepreneurs, and professionals on issues such as gut health, the food and healthcare industry, wellness, following your energy, and having a balanced and holistic approach to life. The Gut Instinct podcast is sponsored by Wellsprout. In this episode, I'm excited to talk with the creative leader turned health and wellness entrepreneur, Dan Paris. Dan is an international agency C-suite leader and has spent a lifetime in creative agency environments as a creator, transformer, and disruptor. Based in Singapore for over 24 years with TBWA and dentsu, Dan's experience spans agency leadership, network client leadership, and leading both networks' key specialist growth disciplines. Strategic by nature, his 30-plus years agency experience has covered many key industries including FMCG, drinks, retail, property, automotive, education, healthcare, financial services, airline and travel and leisure. He has been responsible for winning many high-profile new business wins every year and is a regular keynote presenter and awards judge. He has also led a number of key thought leadership programs, including the Future of Creativity Talks and the Disruptor Series in Singapore, attracting many world-class speakers to wide acclaim. Dan's passion for giving back has seen him become a strategic advisor to a number of NGOs and social impact organizations, and outside of work, he loves adventure travel, eating out, and hiking, and also keeps busy as co-owner of a dynamic health and wellness business in Singapore. With the health and wellness industry now expanding rapidly, Dan's ambition for his businesses is to focus on next-generation gut health solutions dedicated to helping the world become a more balanced and healthy place. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dan.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, I'm quite curious to understand a bit more about your entrepreneurial journey. Could you tell us a bit about that?
I think my journey probably started working for my father. Basically, if I go back to when I was a boy growing up, my father, being Persian, was quite driven about his success, and basically trained as an electronics engineer. And his dream all those years ago was to effectively have his own TV shop. And one day he finally got that off the ground. And being the eldest son, I was expected to start working out of school hours. And I certainly learned to work from a very young age. From sort of 12 and 13, I worked most Saturdays for him. I spent a lot of time working in the evenings, delivering products, setting up TVs and videos, and making sure that everyone was happy, learning the art of customer service, learning the art of installation, making sure there was a great customer experience with all these things. So onwards then to me finishing education at 18 at the time, I then went to work for him full time for 5 years before I ended up going to university. So I think if I was to really think about that need for, to create and to solve problems and to, be a person under your own steam, that was probably where it came from.
How fascinating.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Quite the start. And perhaps we can segue a little bit from how did that journey take you from working with your father, going to university, going to the advertising agency? How did that happen?
I grew up, I wouldn't say a strict household, but certainly it was very structured. And all I thought about was, some freedom and going off to university. And I decided to break free when I was 23 and went to university as a late, mature student, off to London, classic Dick Whittington, if you're familiar with that character. And suddenly I was in London surrounded by, very, very international people that had traveled everywhere, people full of ideas and people who were going somewhere, it felt like there was adventure to be had. So once my degree was completed, I studied accountancy and finance, which I hated. But it was in the second year that when the options arrived, I discovered marketing. And also law. And I really enjoyed both of those subjects all the way through the second and third year. But creativity was the thing that really got me in the third year of the marketing component of my degree. And I realised then, and as I started discovering there were these things called advertising agencies that I'd never heard of before, suddenly that was what I wanted to do. I left university in 1992. There was a huge recession in the UK and there were no roles. So 7 guys, all leaving university together. None of us had jobs. We all lived in this big house and slowly we fought to get jobs. I was one of the last 2 to get a role. In fact, my first role was an internship after applying for 300 or 400 jobs. I mean, it was tough. It was really tough. So I used to work in the evening in an off license to get the money I needed to pay for the train fare to go up to central London to basically do my internship. So once the internship was complete and I had enough experience as an intern, I could get a second internship, which was paid. And then after doing that for 6 months, I finally got my first role.
Amazing.
So it was a lot of effort, a lot of drive. I mean, and certainly you don't see that kind of commitment in youngsters these days, but honestly, that was hard. At the same time, I had a huge passion for music. I was a bedroom DJ, and we realized that the only other way to sort of get some money between us was to start club nights. And if you're familiar with the rave scene of the early 90s, as it drifted out of the fields into the clubs in London, we took advantage of that generational shift, that huge cultural change that was going on, and we started a club night. And so for a long time, that was as important to me financially and commercially as it was for my job. So I ended up going through the 90s doing 2 things.
So enterprising in that way as well.
Yeah, and it allowed me to be very entrepreneurial in terms of how to put these parties on, what creativity we would place into these parties and events. I mean, what experiences we wanted to create. And they got bigger and bigger to the point where we were playing Brixton Academy, and I ended up with a residency at really high-end clubs. Yeah. So that was my journey through the nights in London.
This wasn't in the bio.
No, it wasn't in the bio, but it's in there. It just needs a double click.
I see.
And then September the 11th came. It was 3 weeks after I got married to my wife Emma, and we thought it was time to do something with our lives. And we'd all been traveling around Southeast Asia. We'd been out to do these amazing trips out here. And we thought it would be a good opportunity to relocate and to think about a career in Asia. So we took 5 months off as a proper sabbatical, went to South America, traveled all over the peaks, all down the Andes, up and down the Andes in South America, and ended up here in Singapore in June 2002. So I stayed, in agency life. I joined TBWA. I basically enjoyed a really wonderful 21 years at an amazing creative agency, collecting amazing experiences in various capacities in agency leadership, on working on clients, on very large international clients, and developing practice areas. My wife stayed in the corporate space, and then I guess 8 years ago, as she came out of corporate and sort of slightly disillusioned with corporate life, she approached me and said, "Look, I've been working with this health and wellness company on a consultancy basis, and they're looking for a partner to help them evolve it to the next stage. They relocated to the US and they feel that either the business is going to go to waste or to find a business partner." So that's when we got involved. And if that's the right segue now to bring you to this business. And I carried on in industry until very recently. And Emma got on with the business. The business was quite old, didn't have any e-commerce infrastructure. It was running on WordPress, it had a menu that hadn't been rethought of for a little while. So Emma got really to grips with the back end of the business and really sort of reprogramming the back. And then COVID came. And if there's ever a time to think about, the ultimate test of running a business, it was COVID. Wow. And so we had many a dark day sat in an empty cafe waiting for the delivery thing to start, for takeaway to begin. And that was, again, an opportunity for us to think about pivoting, thinking about, what else would we do? How would we, save ourselves? Because we're only a year and a half in, or not, year and a half in.
When COVID hit?
When COVID hit, but when COVID said, shut down and lockdown and essential businesses only and a load of new rules that no one even contemplated could possibly be placed on society. Suddenly we found ourselves with two businesses, a restaurant business and a clinic business, with pretty much everyone at home. So that's back to being an entrepreneur. You have to solve problems really quickly and to think your way out of it, and to solve problems. So the first, as delivery started, we soon realised certain food didn't deliver very well. There was complaints. We changed that, found the right packaging solutions, found the right food solutions, find the right meal plan solutions, found solutions to help people online with their health needs. So much anxiety out there. I mean, all of these platforms, all these innovations that were going on and testing them and trying them and at the same time trying to save a business, really. I mean, the government here in Singapore were brilliant for supporting us and to put financial aid and compensation systems in place, and various loan mechanisms and whatever. I mean, you couldn't fault it, but one way or another, you've still got to solve the problem and you've still got to fight. And that's what helped us get through it and onwards to a spirit of continuous innovation today, really.
Oh, so many questions that I have now after that quick overview that you just shared with us. So perhaps now, just before we go deeper into some of those stories that you just began to unravel for us, perhaps you could share a bit about the Living in Cafe and the clinic as well, Balanced Living.
Yeah, it's a super interesting business, and when Emma first presented it to me, and I was conscious of the owners and the founders. I guess we should position them as founders. This is a really unusual business, and it still is quite unique in Singapore. The cafe started life in 2011, and it was the dream child, I guess, of the founders, Ash and Dana Heather. Dana and Ash both worked in finance, and I think had got to the point where they wanted to do something different. Came and exited it. Dana had retrained in functional medicine, and functional medicine, I guess, is the umbrella label for all things to do with looking at natural health. So naturopathy sits in there, nutrition sits in there, herbalists sit in there. But functional medicine, for people that train in functional medicine, it's a bit like training to be a doctor. You go through many years of understanding physiology, body chemistry, nutrition, etc. Understanding the role of supplements and diagnostics, and I mean it's a pretty comprehensive training. Around 5 years to get there. And her dream was to open up a wellness centre that involved both a clinic, a natural health pharmacy, and a food business that's dedicated to gut health. So the origins of the food was in raw food, which at the time was very trendy in the west coast of the US. And there's a lot of science around nutritional protection and preservation in raw food. But soon the menu evolved and continues to evolve to become a menu that sort of draws on multiple cuisines or multiple cultures, and focuses really and ever increasingly on gut health. So it's 15 years almost. In August it'll be 15 years of being a lighthouse brand in Singapore, an OG if you want to call it that.
Absolutely.
Totally dedicated to people's health journeys.
Yes, it's definitely when I ask people about Living Cafe, especially when they're looking for something that's maybe soy and gluten allergies, or maybe vegan requirements that they have. If people are looking for food that fits the bill, Living Cafe is probably one of the top names that would come up.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you do a search, top 10 vegan cafes, whatever, will always be in it. And I think we pick up multiple awards, we pick up a lot of recognition. And then, we get a lot of good reviews. We get polarized reviews who don't quite really understand the food of what we do, because they kind of look at it through the lens of buffets and value and classical MSG type taste profiles, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think for people who do know us, that there's a real community around us, which is really interesting. And obviously a lot of people come and go in Singapore, as you'd expect. There's an expatriates community that is quite fluid. But since COVID, we've seen a lot of local interest. People have become very health aware, very conscious of what they're eating. As you know, Singapore recently got its blue zone status, right?
That's right.
And I'm not sure what's involved in claiming that status, but I think Singapore's getting a lot of things right with it when it comes to longevity. And certainly it's great from our point of view to be part of that, to be part of that story. But yeah, I mean, it's 15 years.
Yeah, and it's
still
going
rocking,
strong.
still going strong. Yeah, we're
And
still fighting.
You've talked a bit about the food side of things of the Living Cafe. How about the clinic side of things?
Yeah, so the clinic's born out of a bit like TCM or Ayurvedic medicine. It's really about understanding what's causing the issue inside the body rather than treating the symptoms. And some of that requires diagnostics, some of that requires understanding diets, all sorts of things. But classically, and I'm not a specialist. I've not trained as a nutritionist. I'm not trained as a functional medicine practitioner. So everything that I've learned vicariously from operating a business like this. Yep. But what I do know is that the body basically responds to things it doesn't like, and basically that creates inflammation. And that inflammation goes on to create issues in the body, and some of those issues go on to become autoimmune realities. Yep. No different to the way that Ayurvedic or TCM looks at things. No, that's the business is still very much focused on that. But obviously, when you look at the wider well-being reality, people are now looking at mental health realities. They're looking at physical realities. They're looking at nutrition realities. So we have a whole community of practitioners here that support people on their health journeys. Meditation groups, we have Reiki groups, singing sound bowl groups that come here. We have trauma release groups, hypnotherapy groups. There's all sorts of people that come here and use our space, use our clinic rooms, make use of the pharmacy. But it's all underpinned by the cafe. The cafe seems to be the community HQ that actually
glue that brings it
glues it all together. Yeah, and obviously, linking all of it together, back to the conversation we're having, is the gut, because from what we're now understanding is that the gut is so central to the overall wellness of a human.
Absolutely, and I would say that when I first came here and saw the concept of how there's a clinic component, a food component, I was quite impressed. It's not something you really see very often here in Singapore. Well, perhaps you could share a bit more about perhaps what's the sort of vision that you see of how you bring these pieces together, and what would be some of the challenges that you're coming across?
Well, I have to give credit to the founders for actually bringing those two thoughts into one building. I mean, that was the disruption right at the beginning, to make it accessible, to not make it an environment which feels too clinical, in a building that is dedicated to clinical solutions, or in a hospital or whatever. There was a deliberate attempt to bring it into a character building like a shop house like we're in, to give the building amazing feng shui, and to use the spaces in a way. All we've done since it started is to keep optimizing it. We improve rooms, we improve the facilities, we improve the depth of the retail brands that we support, the platforms that we operate on. I mean, it's quite a complicated business now if you think about it. I mean, it's not just a physical, commercial enterprise. 40% of it is e-commerce. We have platforms on Shopify, we have platforms with the delivery platforms, with partner platforms. It's complicated, right? And it keeps becoming Frankenstein, and we keep looking at how to streamline it, because more and more innovations come out in terms of where we should be accessing. But yeah, I think to conclude the question, I mean, it's the dream and the vision was born in 2011, and we continue to keep pushing it along and keep giving it a direction that is ahead of everyone else, that differentiates from everyone else, that still makes the most of the component parts. I think the core thing that I think we're left to do with, which is part of, again, what makes this conversation so interesting, is that both businesses are united over the gut. One's trying to solve the problems of what's creating inflammation, and the other's trying to solve it through food. And that food is a gift. That food is something that can solve things. It's medicine.
Yes.
And we had a presentation last night, and I never knew that Socrates had said 2,000 years ago, or whenever he was around, that the gut is where all diseases get started. I mean, that's a remarkable insight from 2,000 years ago,
and something that we still are trying to understand.
Trying to understand today. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you were talking about how you're trying to optimize these pieces. I've been speaking to some entrepreneurs about the struggles that they face in trying to build businesses. And it strikes me that given the breadth and the ambition of what you're trying to do here with the business, it could be challenging to find what to focus on. There's so many possible directions you can pick and choose from. So perhaps you could share a bit more about how do you, and that's something I really enjoyed from my conversations with you so far. I feel that you're approaching it in a very analytical way that has an eye on the bigger picture. So perhaps you could share a bit more about how do you choose what to focus and prioritize on in the business, and what will move the needle for you.
I mean, my philosophy is life is a series of experiments. Just keep trying stuff out. You know, that sort of to borrow maybe your tech history, it would be to stay always in beta. You know, and that's the reality. I don't think we should ever not try things out and see what happens. We see things happen pretty quickly. We try stuff out. If it doesn't work, move on.
Yeah.
And that's the philosophy of the team. You know, allows us to look at trying out new meals. If they don't work, we know very quickly they're not working.
Yeah.
We sunset it pretty quickly, and then we're on to the next one. But the point is creativity, right? I mean, you've got to have that slightly innovative streak in you. You've got to have a sort of a yes mindset from the team, and to reward failure in some respects, because it's okay. It's okay to fail, because we'll find something else that will work.
Yeah.
But again, I think you know, like a lot of businesses since COVID, we've all been wobbling around. You know, we've all been trying to work out how to find some sort of direction, some sort of clarity in the chaos, because it's impossible. And if you think about the reality since COVID, we've had an inflationary spike, which just unlisted so many companies. Everyone left their properties. Everyone went to try and find new ideas. Some real, physical business went to delivery businesses. Other business went to another country. So much disruption. It was crazy.
And we're still feeling the effects today.
Exactly. And then we had, the war in Ukraine and supply chain issues. Everything broke down. I mean, COVID had supply chain issues.
Yep.
Suddenly you couldn't buy anything that you were used to buying. You had to find alternative suppliers, and people get disappointed. And people don't understand. As a consumer, they get so used to, business as usual. We were just always in business as unusual. And now we've got another conflict, creating yet more challenges.
There's always something coming up.
Yeah, I mean, we bring a lot of things in from the US, and so freight trebled. We were about to send something over, and it's like, that's triple the price now. Sorry, it's you don't know how much of it's real, how much is made up. It's crazy, but. We come back to where we are. We're in Singapore. There's some amazing people here. There's some very talented people, Singaporeans that have got brilliant ideas. So it's an innovative environment, right? And some of these Singaporeans have been trained overseas, educated overseas. They come back here to let loose with their thinking. And I'm amazed every time I meet people such as yourself that where we go, this is what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And so let's try it out. Let's try it out. And so I'm sort of fueled by the people around me a little bit. I've been in the industry a long time, so I'm warm to innovators. I'm warm to people who've got ideas, and so I sort of half see the business as a platform to try stuff out, as well as the business as usual bit.
Yeah, and definitely the experimentation mindset that you shared, how you are willing to give it a shot, see what happens, and then iterate and try something new.
Yeah, and that's the spirit. You've got to come up each day. I think there's an old Japanese proverb or quotation, which is fall down 7 times, get up 8. Yeah, I'm not sure what the Japanese words are, but it's a beautiful way of looking at the world.
Yeah. And I'm curious now, perhaps if we were to connect that back to your experiences going from running a business with your father at the start with the televisions, and then having your own DJ business while you were also pursuing your creative career while in the UK, and then coming all the way to Singapore as well, and then what you're doing now with this other business and all the setbacks that you've encountered. If you were to look at all of that, and you kept bringing up this word creativity, and which I know you're applying now as well, what's your take on, what's your philosophy around creativity, and what's that common thread of creativity that you see running through all these various experiences and setbacks that you've gone through?
Well, I mean, creativity is the reason I get up in the morning, right? I mean, otherwise it's like, what am I doing today? I mean, if I'm not going in to create, if I'm not going in to solve problems by creating solutions, then I think life gets a bit boring. I don't know why anyone goes to work if they're not if they're not going out to create and change and improve. I mean, otherwise, what's the point? I'd rather be a park ranger, to be honest, and do something that's vocational.
Yeah.
But the idea of going to an office or going into a business and not thinking about what could I do better, that would scare me, actually. That would frighten me it would feel very suffocating to not be thinking like that. So that's the spirit of the day, every day. And I guess it provokes a certain amount of resilience, it provokes a certain amount of innovation in your head, experimentation, as we just talked about, and partnerships, and just collaboration and a team spirit, and so it's infectious. I think it's really infectious, and that's what draws people to each other, because I think like-minded people are going to go and spend time with like-minded people. If you find someone that's creative and thinking about an idea, then ideas get bigger because people are playing with those ideas, right? That's what makes ideas great. And going from good to great is essentially is at the heart of everything that I was ever taught and ever felt working through agency life. The idea of something being good enough was frightening. It had to be great, and each time you pitched, each time you solved a client's problem, each time you do something in your own business, what can I do better next time? And that's a really interesting spirit to carry around with you, I think.
But when you talk about that, is there perhaps a streak of perfectionism that can be a bit crippling? Or how do you think about when you say going from good to great, it has to be great? Does great have to be perfect, or how would you?
I don't think you'll ever reach perfection. In fact, there's a wonderful old tagline for Lexus motor cars, which I still love, and they got rid of it, unfortunately, but it was the relentless pursuit of perfection.
Okay.
And I love the way they structured that sentence, because it means you'll never get there, but it's the spirit of constantly chasing it.
Got it. So, all right, it's a moving target, but it's the pursuit that matters.
It's the pursuit that matters. I mean, how many times have you watched documentaries about, sushi and sashimi chefs? They train on vegetables for 12 years. Yeah. When they perfected that, then they can move to fish, and they do that for 20 years.
There's that movie, isn't it? The sushi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And his father finally, when the son's 60, he's like, okay, you're ready to do it. But it's thank you at last. But I mean, there's a lot of Asian mindsets around perfection, I think, and getting things absolutely perfect, and that it's an art form. Perfection is an art form, and that's why I love living in Asia. And I think there's a little bit of that'll do, and craftsmanship is an art. It's a really interesting thing, and I think you can apply it to business as well as to classical creative apertures like photography or whatever.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It's something I'm trying to explain to people, that building a business is actually a creative pursuit.
It is, absolutely.
And I do get some confused looks and doubting looks when I say that, but I'm very much aligned with what you were sharing, Dan.
We will toast that one day.
And we will keep pursuing that too. But on that front, I guess, on the flip side, right, there's also a sense of, with creativity, it's also creating as you're embracing uncertainty. So perhaps to go back to these challenges that you were facing with COVID, how did you navigate that uncertainty, and how did you manage to keep both these businesses up and running when, as many people know, that in Singapore, many businesses shut down because of what happened during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I remember sitting there. I remember watching the Prime Minister's speech at the time, and it's like, okay, we're going into lockdown in 4 days' time. Prepare, get yourself ready. Yeah. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be tough, because there was no certainty on time. Was this going to be a month? Yeah. Was this going to be 2 months? Was this going to be 3 months? Sure. No one had any previous experience of what that might feel like or what that might mean. Yeah. And so, in your business owner, it's like, well, what's that going to mean? Do I have to lay everyone off? Do I have to give up? And there was a point very early on when we were sat downstairs in the cafe thinking, should we call it? I mean, is this the easiest thing to do? Then we don't need to go through the anxiety of everything. We just hand the keys to the landlord and we're done.
Yeah.
But that's the easiest way. That's the easy way out. And I think we sat down and we put a business plan together on various scenarios around what it might look like if this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. What would be the baseline, and what would be the next baseline, what would be the next baseline. And we just tried stuff out, and also you see the community response. You realize if you're a strong brand with a strong community around you, people responded, and so we were doing email work, we were doing Zoom work, we're inviting people to come and pick up rather than use the delivery platforms to save us money.
Sure.
And the spirit of community was amazing. We tried to help the community as much as possible with calls about health, and we're doing these sort of how to manage anxiety, how to manage stress. So these free sort of town hall kind of get-togethers.
Yeah.
All sorts of things that we did, and we said to everyone, look, we want everyone to protect their jobs, but you're all going to have to agree on what that minimum salary is going to look like, so that we can all get through this together.
Yeah.
And even the team that were in Malaysia, with no opportunity to get across the border, we paid them a stipend just to get through life. So it was hard. Yeah. I'm not going to lie, it was really hard, but we got through it. And then it's funny that when we used the opportunity during COVID to actually then look the other way around. What would happen if we renovated our space and prepared a completely new cafe experience for when people came back, which we did. And with the cafe, it opened, and 4 days later we had our biggest day ever, and 2 days later we got shut down again.
Yes. Can't catch a break.
Seriously, the next variant got announced, and we went back into lockdown. I mean, it's madness, really. And if you think about what we went through, it was madness. It was absolute madness. 2 people dining, 4 people dining, family of 4 split into 2 tables, masks on, masks off, music down, music off. Temperature checks.
I'm getting trauma checks, just thinking about it.
No menus, wiped down menus, meter apart, social ambassadors. Yeah, I mean, it was...
it was probably with the measuring tape and all.
Measuring tape, markers, stickers, whatever.
Yeah.
Every day.
What kept you going at those moments? Because as you mentioned, it was only the thought of it could be easier just to stop this all now and the problem's done. What kept you going? How did you find the motivation?
I mean, it was like, we're not... I mean, I think we're like a lot of people that went through it. I think it was like, we are not going to let this beat us. We're not going to lose. We are going to win. And I think that's just down to human resilience and a sense of that people believe in you, the community believes in you, they want to support you. My wife was amazing in this, basically dealing with all and children and school and everything else. We're a long way from home in the UK, family being sick at the time. It was, and knowing that if you chose to fly back to the UK, which Emma did twice, that she would then have to endure 2 weeks of quarantine there, whatever time she could spend in the UK, and then 2 weeks of quarantine on the way back without her kids, while I was trying to look after this for her, as well as, a shortened week as far as my corporate life was concerned. So, a lot of juggling.
And it was just no, I'm not going to give up.
I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let this beat me. Other things can beat me, but not that's not going to beat me.
Perhaps to link this back to your childhood experiences running the business with your father, were there any lessons perhaps that your father shared that kind of stuck with you that perhaps you sort of find still relevant today as a businessman, as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, look, I think like a lot of migrant people, I think first generation migrants have a work ethic that is hard for other people to understand, because it's they've come from nothing, and they want to achieve and start a fruitful journey for their children, and they feel that's their mission. We had a lot of conflict between my father and I, but fundamentally, I have to respect that he came over to England, didn't speak a word of English, fought like crazy, got educated, got himself into the electronics business because he recognised that was going to grow, and built his own business. And his resilience, his passion, his unbelievable commitment to making that happen had to rub off of me. Whether I'm doing it the same way, whether I'm so bombastic about it, I don't think so. But fundamentally, I definitely have been slipstreaming that mindset.
Yes, and still fighting even
Still
today.
fighting, yeah, and still. I mean, I guess because I've been working in such a creative industry and trying to help clients buy braver work and more innovative work, to succeed. Because I want all my clients that I've ever worked with to win. That's the brief. They're not asking us to create ideas and activations and solutions and advertising just for the fun of it. They want us to help their brands be more recognized, be more powerful, more driven, more involved, more widespread, more sticky, whatever the brief is. And that's extremely powerful. And applying what I was selling into your own business, I think is, that sense of bravery and belief and self-belief is potent, I think.
Yeah.
And back to being infectious, I think.
Yeah. I'm curious now, given you mentioned that as a creative, it was a lot about helping the client succeed. And now with this, how have you applied that to yourself in the business that you're running?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I mean, I sometimes use the same tools, like the way I would write or the way I would frame stuff in a brief, and I apply it to myself. What's the brief I'm going to write for myself here?
What is the brief, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, at the moment, how these two businesses interlock, and how do I make that more powerful than them just being loosely connected?
Exactly.
And how do I put solutions and products in place that tighten the grip around gut health, and that we're seen as the ultimate destination for that. We're seen as an authority. We're seen as a credible solution in that space. We're seen as a thought leader. We're seen as a great community. We're an innovator. That we're creating great food around it.
Yeah.
So that everyone, whichever way you come and touch it, you feel these guys are doing a great job. And it's not about me. It's really about the team that work here and the next generation of people that will work for this business. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's fascinating how, when you were talking about how you're bringing these two pieces together, how you're exploring certain ideas in this space. Perhaps you could share a bit more about what is it about gut health that is it a new trend? Is it just a passing fad? Or is it perhaps something timeless? How do you think about gut health as this piece that brings these two businesses together?
I think it's timeless. I think it's been around forever. I think the modern world's got ill on modern food.
Ultra-processed foods especially?
And I think a lot of that was born initially out of necessity after World War II. I think World War II decimated, Europe, and decimated so many parts of the world. And a lot of things, when you've got millions of people starving, and with everyone on rations, the food industry started innovating, and so, what would have been what was the traditional way of making bread, which we now call sourdough, got sped up with yeast, and we now know that that's sort of bypassed the breakdown of the gluten protein. Sugars were brought in to preserve food so that it lasted longer. There were mass production in the way different crops were developed, and so intensive farming appeared in America and so on. I mean, there's chapter and verse in all of this. But what it's meant over the course of a couple of generations is that food has then entered the system, as wealth has developed, and we've gone from boomer to X to millennial. More and more food solutions, more and more interesting things have arrived. When I was growing up, it felt like a treat having a frozen meal from Bird's Eye or something. And maybe it was because my father, wanted us to eat proper Persian food that was really healthy. But we wanted those Western convenience foods that we saw on the TV, fish fingers and crispy pancakes and whatever else that came out. But you realise, looking back now, that was just the marketing of convenience. Convenience was marketed to housewives who are now working, and these were, food solutions that were designed to be preserved for a long time in freezers or whatever. And as much as they looked like they might taste nice, and you thought they might taste nice, but you had no idea what they were doing to your gut. That wasn't a conversation then.
Yeah.
And so I think what's emerged, and that's why people go, what the hell is going on? Why are so many people gluten-free? Why are so many people dairy-free? Why are so many people vegan? Why are so many people got so many allergies? Why have so many people got so many autoimmune issues? And increasingly as scientific knowledge has now started to understand it, why are cancers everywhere? Why is dementia everywhere? Why are so many children got ADHD? Why are so many people on the spectrum? And more and more science, from what I read and from what I gather vicariously from people, points to the gut. And so as people become more health aware, they're rejecting those foods and they're starting to come back to the way food was intended. I've watched a lot of documentaries about it, rightly or wrongly, and these documentaries are so illuminating about food and the role of food, and ancient man, Neanderthal man, and how he might have lived, and even the role of when there are what do you call it, droughts. The mortality doesn't go down. It goes, whatever. That's the wrong way around, isn't it? And mortality goes down when there's a drought rather than going up, because humans are built to survive, right? They're not going to just drop dead because there's no food. Their bodies will shrink and shrivel a bit, but they are designed to survive. They survive on less and less. And all these documentaries point in the same direction. That gut and what you fill it with and what you fuel it with is at the heart of it. I often say to people in very simplistic terms, you kind of understand that you will get a hangover if you drink alcohol, and it's going to affect your brain and it's going to hurt. And everyone goes, yes. But really, you're going to get a hangover from really poor food as well, right? And your gut is basically going to stress from deeply fried food and food it hates. Yeah. And you're going to go into a similar sort of thing. It's like a hangover.
It makes sense. It's
basically the
longer-term hangover. It creeps up on you without you realizing it.
Yeah, and then when you do your first gut test, I guess I did my first gut test 10 years ago, and you get your first sort of view of what's going on in your body. And you get to see, what's going on from a vitamin point of view, what's going on from a permeability point of view, what's going on, all these things, all these markers. And you go, wow, it's quite awakening, it's quite sobering. And I guess those become a conscious moment that you make decisions to adjust. So I don't eat fast food ever. I don't eat McDonald's or Pizza Hut or KFC or anything like that.
Stronger man than me.
I never would now. I would have to be desperate, but I haven't eaten anything like that for 20 years. Oh wow. 25 years maybe. Yeah. I enjoy the delights of the hawker markets here in Singapore, but I try and pick, the healthier things. Yeah. I certainly don't eat, heavily fried food. That's not what I would eat from the hawker market. But I love, Japanese food for being super clean. I love a lot of Vietnamese food for being super clean. I like, a lot of Thai food for being super clean. And then obviously I'm well fed because I, have a cafe looking after me as well. So I get well fed here. But if I can go back to past COVID, what was really interesting, when I first got involved in the cafe, I kind of felt it was quite Western, quite female. And over the years, and COVID was the accelerator, it's now much more Asian. And a lot of families come here. A lot of families are conscious of diets for their kids here. And so we're doing more and more innovation for the kids menu. Yes. And it's really interesting talking to customers about why they're here. And they generally have had little health scares, or they've become health aware, or they're choosing to become vegan or vegetarian by culture or whatever. There's a lot of drives. Or I'm on a protein diet because I'm a triathlete, but they're all united around nutritional requirements, and they are understanding the role of the gut, and that's amazing.
And I want to explore that thread you brought up a little about the gut health test that you did, and that's something I'm finding, at least from my experiences. A lot of people have this desire to eat healthier, to do something that improves their gut health. And as we were just saying, that the gut is so interconnected with the rest of the body. The gut-brain axis, gut-lung axis, gut-skin axis. There's so much research that's around this now, and that's also emerging to establish this. And the tests actually helps to give that clarity of what is actually going on inside the body. So perhaps you can share a bit about how the clinic side of things is approaching it, perhaps, and what do you think is the importance of these diagnostics and the tests to help people understand what's going on?
Yeah, so I think for the longest time, people would have been prescribed a gut test, right? They would have gone through the system because they know something's wrong. So they might have gone to a medical reality first of all, gone to see their GP, gone to see a specialist, and they would have gone on a journey where they ended up not really getting solved. And to a degree, they've gone that journey because they've got insurance in place to go through that journey. But they get to a point where they go, look, I'm none the better here. I've been taking a lot of antibiotics. I've been, screened and tested and analysed and X-rayed and everything else. I've still got these symptoms. I've got brain fog. I've got eczema. I've got horrible irritable bowel. I've got all sorts of stuff. And at some point, they get suggested or they get referred to come and see a natural health practitioner in a clinic like us. And so these people come in, and suddenly the conversations are looking at it from the other end of the telescope. I'm not looking at the symptoms, and I'm going to now try and understand the cause. And that's where diagnostics come in, and that's why you've got all these specialist diagnostic providers. So that's the moment these tests get suggested. People would tend to sort of go, oh my God, that's $1,000 or $800 to do these tests. But they know that something's wrong, and that actually the test might help. And that's where there's this, I guess, this moment of epiphany to go, okay, I can see what's wrong. I'm struggling with gluten. I've got leaky gut. I've got some permeability issue. I've got an irritable bowel problem. I've got dysfunction. I'm deficient in several vitamins or whatever it might be. I've got a history of pathogens. I've got Helicobacter pylori. So I found out I had Helicobacter pylori. And I'm like, okay, you need to get that looked at. So, from my point of view, that meant having a colonoscopy and endoscopy. And there it is. I've got Helicobacter pylori. And, that's a saving grace as far as I'm concerned, because if I hadn't treated it, all sorts of issues could have come. And so now I do a gut test, or I do a stool test every 2 or 3 years. Now, what I think's changing, and this is the advent of a generational change, right? I mean, so I think in my generation, people don't address something until it's a problem. Whereas I think younger people are like, it's not going to be a problem. I'm going to look at things from a preventative point of view, right? And that's why we're now seeing the conversation around preventative medicine or preventative thinking. And the word longevity starts appearing, because people don't want to necessarily live to a ridiculous number, but they want to live to a great age well. They don't want to have the last 15 years of their life in misery. And that's the biggest motivator there. So, spending a number of dollars on early diagnosis from a preventative point of view is the best money you could ever spend. So we're seeing more and more people inquiring about preventative measures and preventative solutions. So I'm about to start a project with Amelie, which is a local Asian-orientated laboratory here in Singapore, which has got a much more accessible sort of gut test solution. It's half the price of the other ones that we do. It doesn't cover some of the bacteria or the yeast or the viral realities that we see in some of these other tests, but it's giving us a really good barometer of what's going on in the test. It's a good litmus of how healthy you are. It's benchmarked against other Asian users and the Asian pool that they have in their database, and it's actionable. What we're looking at is how can we solve a set of meal solutions, a meal plan that is completely corresponding to your test, so it becomes a personalised meal plan. I think that would be a remarkable next step in what we're looking at in terms of food solutions.
Exactly. And it just occurred to me as well that given the business model that you run, you would actually have a great vantage point of perhaps what somebody would do before and after the test, especially given the various customers that I'm sure have come through the door. You mentioned that moment of epiphany. What's the perhaps behavioral changes that you see, or maybe some choices that you see differently for somebody who has done these tests and has received this insight?
Well, I think generally these people start with some sort of wearable. There's like, okay, I'm monitoring my heart rate, I'm monitoring my sleep, I'm monitoring this. They go and see their doctor, and the doctor says, right, you're 35. It's the first time we ought to look at your bloods. And they do their first bloods and like, oh, got some hormonal thoughts, you got this and they got this.
Yeah.
And I think then, if you look at the other big data points, your DNA and then your gut test, you could look at food, you could look at sleep, you can look at all the wearable worlds, and then you could look at, DNA, bloods, and then nutrition, and therefore your gut. I think the future will be when all those things collide, and then you've got a sort of real-time view of your health, because we know what your DNA is, we know what your wearables are telling you from a long, latitudinal point of view. We know what your last bloods were, because you might be doing it every year or every 6 months, and we can see all your nutritional history because you've been capturing every meal that you shoot in the
all the data.
Yeah, all the data's there. It's unifying it. So I think we're just, from our point of view, we're approaching it from that preventative mindset. There's a shift. They want to proactively look at what to do about their health, what food they should be eating. There's a lot of people very comfortable with meal plans out there, but they're doing it for value and convenience. It's got some healthy wrapper written across it, but it's not actually. If it's in a freezer or in a microwave, it's not healthy. It's as simple as that. If it's made with bad oils, it's not healthy. So I think we have an opportunity here as a business to look at combining all that experience, all those years we've been doing gut testing, look at working with an Asian provider, understanding it from an Asian gut point of view, and then basically linking it to our meals, and then it being personalized. I think there's still got to be a human in the loop, a nutritionist to provide that there's nothing to worry about here. This all makes sense, everything connects. But if there's anything that comes up in a test like Amelie, then we ought to investigate that, for example. So this is your first warning that something's not quite right. You may have a gluten issue. You may be on the doorway to being celiac. You may have a lactose issue. You may, how many people in the Asian gene pool don't produce lactase to break down lactose? There's a lot of people, and yet dairy's everywhere here. Yeah?
That's true.
So, yeah, I'm going to approach this united world that will emerge from various angles, but I suspect that will be the destination.
It makes sense.
A real-time health and reality.
Exactly. And to take it back to the people and the community that you mentioned, and what it is that sort of, perhaps it's an awakening of sorts when people start realizing what is happening within their bodies that they might not have been as aware of in the past. Perhaps you can also share a bit more about your observations of this community that's emerged around the business, the sorts of personalities, or perhaps even what was it that really helped them to get through COVID? What was it about the Living Cafe and the food and the clinic that actually really helped bring them together at this point, that sort of perhaps some stories or maybe even some testimonies that you could share of what was it that was so powerful for them that kept them coming back to you even when everything was shutting down?
It's funny, I think, and I've heard this from a few people, I think people see us as a sanctuary, a safe place, and I think during COVID people were frightened and they knew they could rely on us for food that they could trust. And therefore we could deliver food everywhere in the island. And it was the same time that Automotive Eats had just launched, right? And they were the only island-wide provider. And so we were onboarding early with them. And so suddenly we were able to provide our food everywhere. And we could, provide all sorts of solutions to people. And they were thankful, really, really thankful that they didn't have the skills to cook at home, or they didn't have the energy, they didn't know, all the time or whatever. And so we could deliver great food to them, and they felt safe. And I think that sense of sanctuary is still, something that I'm very conscious of and I'm very protective of, because when people come in to us, we're often asking if you've got allergies or anything that we need to be aware of. There was a guy that came in a few weeks ago, he came in with his camera equipment. I was just intrigued. I was like, what, you've been out on a shoot? Have you been up on one of the national parks just filming or something? He goes, yeah, I've just been playing my camera. And he goes, anyway, went talking, and he turned out to be celiac. And not just celiac, like very, very hard for him, celiac. To the point where if he just touches, one gluten particle, he's in bed for 5 or 6 days, like out. And I'm like, can you imagine living with that kind of condition, and no fault of his own. I mean, he's just happened to become celiac. And so, you know, our role in his life is to be ultra safe, that he can trust us. And he said, I can't even trust my wife to make food for me. I can come and,
Oh dear.
yeah, you're one of two places that I would trust.
Trust you more than my wife. That is high praise indeed.
And to trust us with that is amazing. And then you just go through the same. I mean, all these people I talk to, it's like, I'm celiac, I'm gluten intolerant, I'm dairy intolerant, I'm lost with food. And when, you know, adults bringing their kids in and they've realised their kids are celiac or gluten intolerant. And, you know, when I say to a young kid, you know, and standing in front of the fridge with all those desserts and all those cakes and whatever, I said, you can have anything in here. They just go, anything? Like, anything.
Wow.
You know, and it's lovely.
That's a powerful image.
It's really lovely. And parents love it. And that's, you know, it means that, you know, the food's not stigmatized. And that's one of the other areas that I think, you know, is worth just mentioning here, because, you know, because vegans get stigmatized, vegetarians get stigmatized. You know, well, you don't eat meat and 2 veg. I mean, from a Western point of view, it's meat and 2 veg every day. You know, oh, let's go meat-free Mondays. I mean, all these, you know, loose things that come out as ideas to save the planet or to, you know, be better for you. But they're all, you know, they're all tokens, really. They're not fundamental shifts in the way you look at food. So I think for people that are conscious or have issues and challenges, you know, that's the right word. We're a sanctuary to them, and we're very protective of that.
It makes absolute sense. It's a safe place.
Safe place.
And I'm curious to perhaps to wrap up the first half here, to understand a bit about perhaps that shift that you were mentioning that you've seen since COVID, with the 40% of your business you mentioned was e-commerce.
No, now it's 40%.
Now it's 40%. Yep. And perhaps what are some of the changing patterns that you see in, say, the customers that come through your businesses, as well as perhaps what are the business model adjustments you've made to adapt to this changing situation?
Well, I think from the food business, you know, I mean, I think the whole COVID era created this whole delivery world, right? I mean, it was, I mean, the only food that people delivered really was the Indian restaurants on a Sunday. You know, everyone phoned or Pizza Hut, you know, those would be delivery businesses. And McDonald's had a bit of drive-through business and a bit of a delivery business, but
not exactly the most gut-friendly options.
No. But, you know, obviously the world woke up to the power of delivery, and then suddenly all the platforms were here, right? Deliveroo accelerated, Grab accelerated, Foodpanda launched, and off we went. And suddenly every restaurant had to be on every platform, because, you know, you had a combination of, you know, the way some of these platforms work was 3 kilometer radius from your outlet. And so very community oriented, very local, you know, lots of people, and a lot of people ordering almost instant. They're expecting it instantly. I want it in 20 minutes. You know? So the order comes through, the bite's only 5 or 6 minutes behind the order. And so operationally, we have to make sure that we can deliver a great restaurant experience as well as a delivery and e-commerce experience at the same time. That's not easy. So, and having packaging that's right and easy, fits in bags, everything's pre-packed, you know, and all of that stuff is, you know, that's a operational nightmare to get all that right. And then food that delivers as well as it was packed, you know, because, you know, some food doesn't deliver very well. And I think to this day, you know, fine dining restaurants, you know, when it's on a plate in a fine dining restaurant, it looks amazing. When it's in plastic Tupperware and it's sliding around and it's up, you know, in someone's home, it's like, that's that much money. It's not great, you know. So I think what was really interesting talking to the operators is that a lot of them died right back after COVID and their delivery business collapsed, but ours stayed the same. And so we built this amazing community 3 kilometers around here with Grab and Deliveroo. And a lot of people just trust us for lunch pretty much every other day, you know. So on Deliveroo, we get these, as the request comes through, you could see how many orders. What's quite interesting about Deliveroo, how many orders they'd had, and so you see a lot of regular people that had over 100, over 150 orders from you, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of orders, you know, just non-stop ordering lunch, ordering drink, ordering lunch. And then we get a lot of people walking past and picking up takeaway to go home, so they're phoning ahead, can you prepare something for me? I'll pick it up. And so there's that whole, it's quite tight, right? Quite local,
Yes.
quite neighbourly,
Very much so.
Yeah. From the supplements point of view, I mean, everyone's used to buying supplements online. I mean, iHerb dominates the world with supplements. We probably carry a few more specialist things than them, but we provide that e-commerce solution to all our customers here, because it means they can just do all their repeat orders and subscriptions, and that all works really well. And then we also are a distributor for a water business, a water filter business, and that's people take their water filtering quite seriously now, and we have a very strong business with Epic Water Filters here in Singapore. It was very, very small before COVID, and it's accelerated again through COVID, because people want to make sure their water's clean. So we've learned to become an e-commerce operator as well as a physical operator, and they're two different mindsets, and we unite them in one building, and it seems to work.
Yeah, once again, that surviving and adapting mindset that you apply to everything you've done.
It's been crazy.
I could see. And perhaps if you could just share some advice for the entrepreneurially inclined people and our listeners and the people watching this video and the audience, what would you say to them when going through challenges when building your business?
I think you've got to go back to why you created that idea in the first place, and the passion you had for it is not to give up. Back to that Japanese expression of fall down 7 times and get up 8. I think the guy that invented Angry Birds, he created 52 games that were failures, and then on the 53rd attempt created Angry Birds, and we know the rest of the story. So I think that sense of resilience has to be baked into you. That sense of self-belief has to be baked into you. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, not hate you, because there's a lot of disbelievers. There's a lot of people who give up, and it's not worth it. But I think you need to surround yourself with people who believe. You never give up on your idea. Keep innovating and keep experimenting, and it's that always in beta mindset is what I would say.
Fantastic. Now a word from our sponsor, Wellsprout. Wellsprout is a 100% natural plant-based super greens powder formulated to help time-strapped professionals care for their gut health and energy. Wellsprout contains over 27 plant ingredients that have been carefully selected and scientifically formulated to promote gut health. Wellsprout is high in prebiotics, fiber, and phytonutrients, which helps to nurture a thriving gut microbiome. If you go to getwellsprout.com, that's getwellsprout.com, you can claim a special offer of a welcome kit and 10% off any order with the promo code Gut Instinct. Full disclosure that I'm a co-founder of Wellsprout, and my goal with the Gut Instinct series is to raise awareness and bring relatable information on gut health and health-related issues to the general public to help bring our lives and bodies into greater alignment. I'm quite curious to dive a little bit more into your advertising experiences that you went through as well. Perhaps to tie it back to these topics that we're covering today, perhaps what's your take of how the advertising industry talks about healthcare, talks about food, and what are some changes that you think should perhaps it's high time to happen?
Yeah, let's wind back to, I guess, the advertising, the role of advertising. I mean, obviously, advertising is a paid form of communication to get people to understand the visibility of a brand, its role in your life, or the territory that it occupies, the benefits it might have. Persil washes white, those kind of things. And obviously, advertising is a form of creativity to tell stories in a very short period of time, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. When I was growing up in TV format, but over the years, more and more channels of communication have opened up to create quite complex ecosystems, right? And so agencies over the years, that what were called advertising agencies, have become way more complicated creatures, because they have to navigate quite mad ecosystems in the grand scheme of it. And some of it's media, some of it's the creative side of it, some of it's the CRM and data side of it, and all of that is mashed together now in large agency holding groups. And I've had the pleasure of working in two of those, Omnicom and TBWA, and then obviously Dentsu with the Japanese network. So brands, large international brands come to networks like this to look for guidance and therefore the management of those brands and all of that work around the world, and delivering these messages and connecting at the right place at the right time with the right people. And it's the same story all the time. But creativity, and for certain brands, comes down to the form of entertainment, and so in some countries like the UK, Australia, South Africa, advertising is a form of entertainment. People almost enjoy the ads. The ads are on, and so it became really entertaining, really enjoyable to watch ads. And so some ads are perennial, like the John Lewis Christmas ad. I'm sure you've heard of that. Every year, that's probably one of the most waited for briefs of the year. And every year, everyone's really excited about the John Lewis Christmas film. And it captures the spirit of Christmas in the UK. And I imagine there are ads all over the world that people get really excited about because it's a repeat from previous years. You build up equity around these ads.
Yeah.
So when it comes to food and nutrition, some categories can be very entertaining, like beer and wine. They often have very entertaining sort of ways of talking to people because they tap into culture. They get really involved in culture. Some can be very artistic. Guinness advertising, super artistic. Some of the most awarded advertising ever. Pizza Hut, will be playful, the joy of pizza, the joy of food, it won't ever talk about nutrition, but they will talk about the joy of pizza and the joy of, coming together in family time. So all of these brands will find their way, their position, and their story they want to tell. And our job as an agency is to bring that to life and tell that story in beautiful ways and very memorable ways and build memory structures with the brand. Right? And that's our job. We're playing with psychology, we're playing with sociology, and we're playing with culture, and that's at the heart of everything that we do. And so when you're working with really, genuine creatives, what they come up with, some of the ideas and the scripts and the activations they come with are brilliant. It's just brilliant. Do they all get sold? No. Some of the work ends up being quite mainstream, but some of the work isn't. So some brands like Nike and Adidas, you go, wow, that works amazing, because they've got bravery built into their system as an organisation. Other organisations have to be functional. You've also got to look at the reality of regulatory frameworks by countries, because certain countries you're not allowed to advertise things, right? So if you look at pharmaceuticals and drugs, you're allowed to advertise the hell out of them in the US, but you're not allowed to advertise them in any other market. So you don't see pharmaceutical advertising. You might see pain relief with Nurofen, or you might those over-the-counter type things that you might see, but you won't see hardcore pharmaceuticals. When it comes to food, most international brands are classically not going to be health-orientated brands. They're going to be convenience or experience type brands, and they're never going to have a health narrative. They might touch on it or claim little moments about health, and they will try and reinforce some of those health signals when you're dining in at the menu and all the rest of it. The healthy choice, this is healthy, less oil, all sorts of things they might say, but they're not really a health brand. I think other brands then, I guess, have started to get much more active in social media, and so that's when you've seen the influencer world come in, and so the role of influencers allows them to borrow the equity of the influencer, the voice of the influencer, to validate what they're doing and to sort of underscore certain healthy credentials, because they're not saying it themselves, the influencer's saying it. And so that's become a very popular way of delivering messages. And then obviously you've got retail, and so a lot of brands will look at their packaging, they will look at their promotional messaging, they will look at their delivery partners or channel partners, they will look at how they do promotions with a cold storage or whatever, and then obviously you've got smaller independent type brands that will build their brands through word of mouth or through amazing menus or for whatever else. But we're all marketing, and it's a marketing-led set of categories. Who does what and how well it's done will come down to creativity, come down to the stories you want to tell, and quality of the brief that's written, to be perfectly honest.
And it's interesting because it seems to me that there's this emphasis on what is the emotion we want viewers or consumers to have, what are the stories that are being broadcast to them, perhaps. I'm trying to understand here, right, for a consumer, given there's all these messages coming from all over, what would you say, how should a consumer make sense of all these messages? How would you make this shift towards perhaps you've realized you want to live healthier, eat healthier, but yet at the same time, there's all these messages coming from all over with these different companies with different stories that they're trying to send to you, and it's fun, it's entertaining, but at the same time, does the change start with enough, perhaps a critical mass of consumers realizing, hey, actually, we want something different from the market. So that's maybe then when maybe companies start shifting that say, okay, we need to, rather than just throwing some, I don't know, fiber into our product, maybe we need to start reevaluating and producing actually healthy products. Or what do you think is the role of the individual consumer, and what do you think will actually create that shift towards healthier products coming into the market?
I mean, consumers are grown ups; they make their choices, right? I mean, they're still going to McDonald's, they're still going to,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's still around.
It's still around. I mean, sometimes when I'm going for a morning hike and I go past the McDonald's at Beauty World, and there's hundreds of people in there at 7:30 in the morning. I'm like,
because the messages are too effective.
Well, and also I think maybe they just don't care about health in the way that we care about it, right? I mean, and so I mean, it's all, I find it odd. I find it odd that people are so committed to that kind of food, and I'm not sure at what point does the government intervene on that message or put rules in place? And man, I don't think McDonald's are claiming overtly any kind of health narrative. They're not. But they are selling taste and loving it, right? I mean, that's what they sell. And those structures are in people's brains, and people still have that guilty pleasure trip, right? And I'm going to get a McDonald's, and off they go. I don't think we're ever going to change human nature. There's no way. People still sin. People still love their naughty stuff. But there are people on the other end of the spectrum who would never touch it, and then they recognize what it does, and they're like, I'm not interested. It's a consumer choice. Every brand will deliver its stories, make its claims, and it's up to, the reality is it's a consumer choice and living within the advertising regulations, and that's it. The more creative, the brief will be about how to make that story interesting and be reflective of the brand. That's it. I mean, that's it. But consumer choice is still consumer choice.
Makes sense. Perhaps as an individual, what's your take on perhaps the state of the healthcare industry at this point, and perhaps what are your thoughts about how the healthcare industry is approaching health? Does it take enough of a preventative lens, or is it a reactionary lens, or what are some of your thoughts around that?
I think it varies country by country based on the healthcare systems. I mean, Singapore has a very nurturing approach to health, I think. It's tried and tested and proven. It believes in the data, so it will funnel people through the medical system because that's what's there, and it's very good, right? And so you can't possibly fault the medical system. Whether people need to go to a medical solution straight away and can solve things themselves naturally is still a moot point. All we can do is provide that doorway. If you want to come and take a look at it, come and take a look at it, and we'll help you. People just, I think, need to go through an education process, and that education process will start that journey of looking at what's right for you, and finding the right. My wife always talks about it: get your balance right. So for me, I like the 80-20 principle, 80% healthy, all the time, and then 20% like, yes, I will have a glass of wine, I will, have something naughty to eat, but it's not McDonald's, it's not KFC, it's going to be something from the food court, or a slightly decadent meal at a French restaurant or whatever, But as long as I live that 80-20 and I balance it out with my exercise and regimes, whatever, I feel happy. But for everyone else, how they touch the healthcare system and what they might need it for will come down to the challenges they're facing. There are some things that natural health world can't support. If you've got something, if you're in an accident or you've got some trauma, that's what the medical world will deal with very, very efficiently. But when it comes to what we're talking about, making decisions, particularly around food, when I've been to the hospitals, I feel really disappointed about the food solutions downstairs. It's like, it's a food court, it's Deli France, it's Old Chanqui. Those aren't healthy solutions, but they work for the leasing model that those buildings are built around. They want the optimum rent, and therefore whoever's going to pay for it, and the margins to pay for that lease is going to come off high margin food that isn't very good. And that's just the truth of it, right?
And a bit contradictory.
Yeah, exactly. So people are coming downstairs, what should we get? And you'd have thought that people would be thinking, I need something healthy. I'm in an environment that should be health guaranteed, and it's not, McDonald's I don't think are allowed into hospitals, but they're going to be close by. But, I don't know how many times you've been in a hospital, but if you look around, it's not particularly healthy food. It never is.
And on that note as well about food, then since we just talked about the healthcare industry, how about your take on the food industry and the sort of options available and how consumers go about perhaps deciding, what should we eat? What do I enjoy? But perhaps maybe I should have thought a bit deeper about the nutritional value of.
Yeah, I think so. I think different countries have different approaches to the transparency of what's in food, right? And so Singapore's quite it's quite strict on how much sugar's in here. Is it an A, B, C, D kind of level of sugar? I think in the US you can almost make up a name for a chemical and disguise it, kind of thing. In Europe, it's really strict, right? So there's an immense amount of transparency about what's in it. So I think regulation has forced food manufacturers and food providers to display quite openly what's in there, what are the ingredients, and what are the macros, and that's mandate on packaged food. And that's really important because therefore you are allowing consumers to make a choice as to whether I'm going to buy that or not. Whether consumers move to consciously move to a healthier choice because of what they're reading, I'm not sure.
Back to your point about choice.
About choice, and do they really understand what these chemicals do and what they're going to do to your body? No. Well, should they go and research that? Yes. A good friend of mine, very healthy, sporty woman. So what I do, I get my meals off this particular meal plan provider, and they're really healthy. And I was like, well, send me the label on the back. And the label comes to me, and I'm like, well, what are all these things on here? What are all these M's? They're all modifiers, right? They're all designed to preserve the food. And preservatives is something we will never do in our ecosystem. No preservatives. And so when people are, when I'm talking to third-party retailers, can we stock some of your stuff? I'm like, yes, you can. And then they go, well, what's the shelf life? And well, if that's the question, then this conversation's over because there are no preservatives in our food. And this is the issue. Retailers want shelf life to be guaranteed for a certain amount of time, and that means preservatives. And we're already into a place where health is not the primary part of the conversation. So that's what people should be thinking about: has it got preservatives in it? If it has, do you want that? Same with the water. It's like, we get that water, municipally supplied water, is good, but it's still got contaminants in it, like fluoride and chlorine and whatever. But you have a choice. Do you want that in your water? You can if you want. There are solutions to take it out, and it comes down to you can filter your water. If you don't filter your water, your body will. It's as simple as that. So same with the preservatives. Do you want the preservatives in your body? Because your body's going to have to break all those down, package them all up, and get them out. They are toxins to the body. Do you want to go through that process? If you do, That's fine. If you don't, buy healthy food.
Yeah, it's making me realize that I think, interestingly, my sense is that in certain cultural contexts, perhaps over here, there's so much trust in perhaps that, oh, whatever options you're provided with have already been vetted. But actually, like you pointed out, the information's right under our noses, it's right there on the packaging. But I wonder how many people actually do review the packaging, understand what's inside, because ultimately it's still, the choice is still the consumers.
Right, and so there are apps, right? There are apps. So, I mean, what was happening, I think food manufacturers were disguising these ingredients by calling it something that sounded, high fructose syrup or whatever it might be. And, it's like, well, that sounds all right. But it's not. So it's absolutely a terrible chemical that will create havoc in your body. So, obviously still available in most products in the US, but it's not available in Europe, and so we're seeing trends. So in Marks and Spencer's now have a new range in the UK where it's like only 3 ingredients. It's water, salt, and meat. That's it, right? And so that kind of blatant transparency that's forcing you to go, that's all that's in here. I praise. That's exactly that's how all food should be. It's funny. I was out with some friends on Sunday and they had some Japanese snacks, and I was like, and Singaporean friend of mine was like, "What do you think these are really tasty?" I was like, "What's in this stuff?" I went to the pack, and the ingredient list was, it took me 10 minutes to read it all out, and we were laughing so much about what could all these things be. Should we look it up? And back to the apps. There are apps now where you can scan the QR code of any product, and it will tell you on a red to green rating, 1 to 100. How healthy this thing is, how many chemicals does it have? So tools are there. It comes down to that choice and your own human psychology and your commitment to your welfare and to your well-being as to whether you want to make the healthy choice or not make the healthy choice, or how many unhealthy choices are you going to have in a week, or so on. It's all down to choices. I mean, consumers are in charge of their own destiny. That's it.
I'm feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders now after our conversation. Perhaps then to end with a few final questions. Perhaps putting your creative hat on, what do you think that the health and wellness industry could be doing better about the way they're getting these messages and these stories and out to consumers? What could be perhaps what are certain approaches that you think they could be improving in how they're sending out these ideas to the market?
I think we do a pretty good job, to be honest. I think if we all had more money, we'd spend more money on advertising, or on communication. But we're all. I think the people in the ultra healthy space like us are all going to be independent. There's no chain, and we are operators that live with it. And for us, it's harder because there's a lot more prep. There's a lot more. The cost of our food and our human time is higher than the factory-based solutions in food, where you just have one human just processing whatever the pre-packaged food is. So from our point of view, we do it for love. We don't necessarily do it for money. I think we do a good job. I mean, we could shout a bit harder. We could be more creative in delivering our messages or more convincing in our messages. But fundamentally, I think we're doing okay. I think there's a lot of distortions from social media.
It's very noisy.
Very noisy. I mean, the one thing that COVID did is gave birth to millions of healthy well-being practitioners. And look at me, I'm so healthy. I've done this live. I've got this. I've done a cleanse. I've done that. I've done yoga, and it's all made up, right? I mean, they're doing it for followers and for monetization. And that was the difficult part of COVID, because so many people came out, being health coaches or whatever. So that's the ugly side of it, I think, to a degree. There's a lot of pretense. There's a lot of people clinging on the coattails of it all.
It's hard to separate out the signal from the
noise.
Really
hard. It's really hard for consumers to know what's real and what's not, particularly in that kind of environment where the e-commerce and the algorithms are following the noise to a degree. But let's see. We're opening into this new agentic era, and I think the agentic era will force a lot more transparency, and will force a lot more consideration and contextual thinking from people. As long as they don't abdicate their own reasoning, I think the agentic world should help a little bit, because the search could be manipulated.
Yeah, and I would say perhaps that's where this evidence-based as well as diagnostics to understand what's going on in the body is going to become even more important, perhaps, that people actually understand what is the reality of what's happening in their bodies with all these choices, the cumulative effect of the choices they've been making. And hopefully also that if more and more content creators as well as brands could actually show the proof or the evidence, or how is there a good science behind what they're saying, or is it just maybe a bit more of bells and whistles and
exactly. And that takes us to this whole space of conscious consumerism, right? And to be conscious about your choices, not just in terms of ethical sourcing or in terms of packaging and recycling, but also in terms of the food that you're going to eat and put in your body. You know, if you're conscious, you'll spend a couple of dollars more on it, and you'll do the right thing. And that's the thing. What's the thing you want to do? Is it the right thing, or the half right thing, or the wrong thing? You know. But I think it's down to creating a conscious community that love their bodies and love their families and love their kids, and look at, you know, preventative measures on their health, and, you know, subscribe to a spirit of what longevity is really about.
Makes sense. And our final question, we like to usually end with this question to ask you, perhaps, if you were to summarize the breadth of the topics we've talked about in one word, or perhaps one phrase that sort of captures all these experiences that you've been on and the journey that you shared with us during this session. What's a parting thought you would like to leave us with?
I think the first word that's come to mind is reassuring that what we're doing is the right thing. You know, that we're on a good journey. We believe in what we're doing. We've got amazing people around us, amazing partners, you know, amazing opportunities. That we're in a great country that believes in, you know, in society doing well and being healthy. You know, all the ingredients for what we need to be successful are here.
Yes.
And I'm reassured by that, and I'm reassured that I've got a great team, that my spirit hasn't died yet, and that
still fighting.
My wife still loves me, and that we're fighting. You know, the fight is worth going for, and that running your own business is a sacrifice worth making. You know.
Absolutely, and thank you for that reassurance as well.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and learn more about us at getwellsprout.com.